Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we share all things people stuff in leadership. Learn from leaders who have done the hard yards and learn from experience. Hear from expert authors about the latest insights from culture to strategy and messy people dynamics. Get tips and insights from multiple award-winning author and leadership expert herself, Zoe Routh. Now, on with the show.
Well, hello there. I am Zoe Routh. I am your friendly neighborhood Canadian-Australian leadership expert, and I specialize in working with teams, particularly on people issues in teams. I'm kind of like a mountain guide for teams. I love to explore what's happening with the team, either from their strategy or culture point of view, and really go on an adventure together to explore different ways of working better together. And I love this idea of mountain guides, adventure, and working better together because that is the exact theme for today's podcast. My guest today is Jade Lee. She is an HR specialist and she's had 20 odd years of experience working in different corporate organizations on engagement strategies for employees. And then she went on a big, long adventure to the Himalayas, trekked to Everest Base Camp, came back and reinvented herself, essentially. And we have a hilarious conversation where we explore that very particular journey where she trekked to the Everest Base Camp, fell in love, came back, brought a husband back with her eventually, and discovered there were so many important lessons she learned from her Sherpa about how we can build better engaged teams. And her latest book, her new book, is called What My Sherpa Taught Me About Teams. And just a little note about the audio. We had a couple of background noise issues. First of all, there was the rain. She's in Brisbane and there's a heavy torrential downpour. So not sure if that comes through on the sound. So just be mindful of that. It does sound like some weird background noise. There's that. And then she had her lovely dog, Nevada, come and share their experience with us. So we have a little bit of dog action amongst all of the conversation as well. So just a little bit of entertainment for you. So without further ado, this is Jade Lee and on with the show. Well, Jade Lee, all the way from, I didn't ask you where you were from. Welcome to the show.
Hey Zoe, all the way from Brisbane. Rainy Brisbane today.
Oh, beautiful rainy Brisbane. I love Brisbane. It's a fantastic town. But you didn't always live in Brisbane, I don't think. Did you?
I grew up in Brisbane. I lived the first 21 years of my life in the same house in Brisbane. And then I decided that that was a bit boring and I spent the next 10 years travelling everywhere. So from London, Canada, Ireland, Townsville, Hobart, Melbourne. I think I've missed somewhere. But yeah, so and then I came back and now live about a kilometre from where I grew up.
Hey, yes, it's a bit of a hero's journey. You leave for grand adventures and then come back to where it all began. But along the way, like you've got a taste for adventure and a taste for travel. And you've got this fabulous new book out, What My Sherpa Taught Me About Teams, which is a beautiful book, well-researched, well-told, and a lovely story. How did you get a taste for going into the wild places?
It's an interesting story, I guess, Zoe. So I was, as many people are, quite disengaged with my work in my late 30s and wasn't really sure, what I was doing it all for and decided I'd go travelling. So I had been travelling quite a bit when I was younger, but hadn't been overseas travelling for a number of years. So I thought, let's go travelling. And off I went in Vietnam, Cambodia, and then looked on the map and saw that Nepal wasn't that far away. And I thought, I wouldn't mind going and trekking to Everest Base Camp, as you do when you're a bit crazy. And yeah, so then I decided to trek to Everest Base Camp, and that was really where the idea for the story came. So the man who was my Sherpa over there, so my guide, we got along very well, Zoe, and he's now my husband.
Good job. That's what I like. Go traveling, find a husband, bring him back, sorted.
Yeah, well, I figure if you get to like 38 years of age and you haven't found the man of your dreams and you find him on Everest, well, so be it. That's where you bring him back to.
Good job. I was 32 when I went on that mission, so not, a little bit around the same age. Like, right, got to find my Prince Charming. I've kissed too many frogs now. Let's go. So let's rewind a little bit. So first of all, like deciding to trek to Everest Base Camp. Everest Base Camp's a bit of a doozy of a trek, as I understand it. Did you feel prepared going up for that trek, or did you just wing it?
No, I probably wasn't as prepared as I would have. I was quite fit, and I actually handled the trekking quite well, but I didn't actually train for months like a lot of people do. So from when I decided I was going to do it to when I actually trekked was only about 2.5 months. But it was something like it wasn't a burning desire. And I think that's what's so funny about my experience is that it wasn't something I was desperate to do, but something that was just kind of in the back of my mind. That'd be kind of fun, and so I just went and did it. And a lot of people are like, what made you do it? And I'm like, I'm not sure. And maybe that was the universe. But I guess it taught me many things. But when you are trekking to Everest Base Camp, you're not actually going that fast. Like it's not a race. It's actually a really slow experience, which is probably what I loved so much about it. You really have to slow down because there's no point getting up to altitude really quickly because your body needs to acclimatize. So you only really trek for about 5 hours a day. Yeah, so I actually really enjoyed it. What I do say to people is if you've got bad knees, don't attempt it if you've got bad knees because there's a lot of steps.
Okay. Was that a dog jingling past you?
Yes, there is a dog. There is a dog.
Awesome. What's your dog's name?
Her name is Nevada. She might pop in here in a minute.
Okay. Hello, Nevada. So slow trek up a big hill. How long was the trek? Is it weeks?
No, so all up, it was 14 days to get up and back from Lukla. So you fly in about 2,500 meters high altitude, and then you trek for probably about 8 days up, and then you come down very quickly because you need to stop and acclimatize on the way up, which is why it takes longer.
Okay, awesome. So let's set the scene here, right? So we want to get the lessons out of this from a team and leadership point of view. So you make the decision, you're going to go on a trek. Do you go with a tour group, a company, or did you just show up and hire a Sherpa independently? Like what's the logistics, first of all?
I'm laughing because that's what you would think. You would think that you would actually, have it all planned out. But no, I rocked up to Kathmandu and I didn't have a plan. So the man who was taking me back to the hotel that I had booked for $13 Australian, he said, I've got a travel agent. And so I went and met him the next morning. And then he said to me, yes, I've got a guide who will also carry your bag. And I'm like, that's the man for me. So I didn't have a plan at all. And in more developing countries, they try and encourage you to kind of be a guide between 1 or 2 people as opposed to a guide between 6 people because they employ more people. And I was really happy with that. So yeah, it wasn't really as well thought out as you would have imagined you'd do, but all worked out well in the end.
So it's you and one Sherpa, and then off you went?
Yep, me and one Sherpa, and off we went. And like when I talk about it, it does seem a bit scary. I probably should have thought it through a bit more. But along the way, we caught up with quite a few different people. So there's lots of other people who are staying in the same tea houses on the way up. So even if you're just trekking with your own Sherpa, you meet a lot of other people along the way. And that's how you kind of form your own team on the way, which was quite interesting. So we ended up getting to Everest Base Camp. There was probably about 6 of us all together. So Sherpas and trekkers, we all got to Everest Base Camp together. But yeah, it was interesting how you met different people along the way and you connected more with some of them. And then by the time you got to the top, even though you weren't in an organised group, you had formed your team. You had formed your summit team, I guess.
Okay. So tell me a little bit how the idea for Sherpa's teaching you about teams occurred. By all accounts, like the idea of organically people coming together loosely on a similar mission and all of a sudden gelling, it's not your usual pattern for creating a high-performing team. So tell me a little bit about the experience and the extrapolation into what you learned around teams.
Yeah, I guess, so from when I actually trekked to Everest Base Camp to when I produced the book was about 7 years. So these was a lot of thoughts that kind of accumulated over time. But one of the key things is around the idea of the Sherpa being the humble leader and being kind of that servant leader who allows people to get to the summit first and supports them to get to the summit. And the other point is the fact that Sherpas, they have a different team very regularly. So they're constantly getting new teams. They don't spend years or months with the same team. And so they have to develop that connection really quickly. And their abilities to be genuinely interested in the people who they come in contact with and to be able to build that sense of camaraderie within the team, I just found that quite interesting that they could actually facilitate that, because people were, having to support each other on that trek, yet they would have a whole new group of people in another couple of weeks. So that's all around that ability to build the connection, which is what I really like about the way the Sherpa builds their team.
So the connection piece, so what is it that they do? Because a lot of leaders don't find that a natural thing to do, to build connection with individuals. Did you see any magical skills or specific things that they did that maybe they're not magical, maybe some specific things that they did that allowed that connection to occur?
Yeah, so I think that genuine curiosity, like they're meeting people from all different walks of life, from all different countries, and they're just genuinely curious in all aspects of their life. Like when we first started trekking with my Sherpa, like in the first hour and a half, he'd established what religion I was, where I'd gone to school, all the details of my family, the fact that my sister had a daughter that she had conceived through a US sperm donor situation, like all this stuff I'd revealed to him in the first hour. And I was just like, this is amazing. Like, you're telling me how much he liked my watch and where did I get my watch from? It was just really nice question asking, but with that softer approach. And in his circumstance, it actually happened really quickly, but it's just those soft questions and then just building an understanding of me as a whole person, like all the different things that I do, to do with, what sports do you enjoy playing, all the way through to, what qualifications do you have and what do you do at work? And it all comes together to create the idea of the person. And quite often in leadership in our modern workplaces, we become a little bit too focused on the outcomes of the work and forget about, asking questions of people as a whole person.
Love it. Did he give you any breathing room for you to ask him questions?
He did. So he was told me quite a few stories. So one of the stories that he told me that I still tell to this day is about how he had to bring a lady down from high altitude. So she had a high altitude sickness, and he had to work with another Sherpa to get her down. Like, she was very close to Everest Base Camp, so she was, above 5,000 meters, and they had to get her down overnight, and they carried her down Nepali style. And I was like, my big question at the end of that was, did she give you any tips? And he's like, oh yeah, she gave me some really good tips. So yeah, so there was just, I guess it's a sense of presence, because there's nothing else to distract you when you're on the trekking trail. It's just you and the nature and the people who you're with, and you can just experience things, really in a real genuine sense, and ask those questions as they come up. So it wasn't forced or anything. I guess that's the key point.
So the story ends with you marrying the guy. At what point, was it during the trek that you realized, hang on a minute, there's a little bit of spark of romance? Was that when it happened, in 14 days?
Yes, it did. It did happen in the 14 days. And having a background in human resources, I was very adamant that he was my employee and none of these shenanigans going on. But then I just figured, hey, I'm in the Himalayas. Who's ever going to know? Let's just go ahead with it. There was enough of a spark there. So I thought we'd go down that track, which was just amazing. It actually just really seemed natural. It just seemed like, yeah, this is the man. This is the man I want to spend, not so much at that time I want to spend the rest of my life with, because I thought at the end of the 14 days that would be it. But yeah, then it just kind of kept going and the world just kept pushing us closer together. But yeah, it was on the track. It was definitely on the track.
Was it on the way up or on the way down? That is kind of like this crystallization happened.
Okay, so I'm going to be honest with you here, Zoe. A lot of people do know this story. It may have been on the first night. There may have been a little bit of rice wine, and yes, there may have been some kissing on the first night.
I'm trying to think, where do I get a leadership lesson in this story?
If you recognize somebody who'd be good for your team, you should make sure you get them on board as soon as possible. There's your leadership story.
Techniques, mostly optional. Oh, okay. All right. So it's good to have a good connection, and he asked you lots of great questions. So what else, like that whole connection piece and servant leadership piece was really important in terms of building teams. What else did you learn about building teams on the trek or from your Sherpa?
From my Sherpa? Well, there was a few things, but I guess celebrating the successes along the way, being able to look back at where you've come from. So that's like a key part of building good teams, being able to not necessarily wait till you get to the summit to celebrate, but go, oh, look how far we've come today, and look back along the way. So that's one of the key aspects. And also that level of appreciation and that trust. I guess when you're on a mountain, you can at times have a really, like, basically some people's lives are going to be in your hands. And being able to really, truly find that level of trust that people are going to support you and that you will support other people on the journey as well. That's probably the key things in terms of creating high-performing teams. Obviously, in our workplaces, we don't need to, necessarily save someone's life, but knowing that if something comes up or that if you need a hand, that you can ask for help really creates a great environment for people to succeed.
That doesn't always happen automatically, though. So I know a lot of organizations and teams that struggle with the idea, like, I don't know if I can ask for support because you kind of feel punished if you don't pull it off yourself. So how do you actually create that space where it's okay to ask for help and to support one another?
Yeah, I think that what the Sherpas have that we probably don't have is that lack of politics. So they're not worried about somebody else beating them to the top or somebody else, getting the accolades. And in terms of creating that psychological safety within teams, it's developing the understanding that we'll all get there together. It's not that one person will get there first or that only one person will get there. Like, we will all get there together. So actually instilling that idea within the team that we are all in this together. And I agree with you, Zoe, depending on the culture and people's previous experiences, that can be really difficult to instill. But it comes through showing up and showing the team regularly, and not just from the leader. That has to come from everybody. That everyone's going to support each other. So it's up to the leader to actually create the environment where people are able to collaborate and able to feel supported, but it actually is each individual needs to be committed to that as well. And that also comes through appreciation, everyone showing appreciation to each other and recognising everybody's contribution to the overall goal.
I find this amazing that this actually happened in a collection of, I'm thinking about your trek now. You started off, you and your Sherpa, and then you gathered other Sherpas and guests into a collective of 6 where you didn't have independently, you set up out on the journey independently, but then all of a sudden you morphed in together. And that kind of cooperation without having decided to set out together as a group of 6 is really interesting. So what was the imperative? Like, that's a big commitment to go from you and your Sherpa to a bunch of other strangers. So what was the leap there? So how did the Sherpas facilitate that leap from groups of 2 into a collective of 6?
I guess it was 2 things. So one of the key things with regard to a team succeeding is knowing where they're going, like knowing what the vision is. And we all had the common vision, right? We were all going to Everest Base Camp. So we were all heading to the same place and we were all pretty much along the same part of the journey. They also, I guess, recognise the fact that they create a better experience for their clients when their clients are talking to other people, happy, enjoying the other conversations. So in some way I spoke to my husband about this, they would actually recognise he recognised who I was getting along better with And then he in the background actually spoke to those Sherpas, and they kind of created it. So when there was an acclimatization day, which is where you climb higher and then you sleep in the same place. So you kind of get up a bit later and you climb, a couple of 100 meters higher and then come back down. They'd go, oh, we'll all do this together and we'll see how it goes. So they actually do facilitate that themselves. And obviously over many years of recognizing that if they bring together the right group of people, they'll all be a lot more excited. The photo of me on the front cover of my book is me and 6 other people all enjoying the accolades of getting to Everest Base Camp. Now, if that had just been me and my Sherpa, probably wouldn't have been quite as much fun. And now I've developed those friendships with those people to this day. So they do that somewhat deliberately, recognizing who's getting along better together, because there was quite a few people who were there that we didn't end up going up with, like they went up a little bit earlier in the day or whatever. So it's definitely a deliberate action on the place of the Sherpa there.
That's really interesting from a team dynamic point of view. So thinking about the corporate environment where you don't always have the luxury of choosing people based on synergistic relationships. What can leaders listening take from that experience in terms of applying that to creating good teams?
In workplaces, we're all going to have to work with different people regardless. Like, it's not as if we're going to be able to get along swimmingly with everybody. And Sherpas themselves, like they will always be with people who, some people they like a little bit more than others. It's really around, I guess, the common goal and knowing each other's contributions and knowing how they're going to, how other people in the team contribute to get there. And if people are really clear as to people's strengths in the team and who to go to with different questions, that's really beneficial, as opposed to, like, we're all headed in the same direction, but if we don't actually recognise what the contribution of each of the different people in the team are, that's going to be a little bit more difficult if we don't gel with them so much on an individual basis.
That makes a lot of sense. How do you actually determine contributions in a commercial enterprise like trekking to Everest Base Camp? Like, I get it on a team point of view, but how do you actually do that with people when they're Sherpas in a commercial adventure?
So with us, with like getting to Everest Base Camp, I guess it probably wasn't so much of an issue, because really there wasn't, like most of us, like all of us were fit and we all just basically had to walk. Like, we didn't actually have to contribute so much in terms of, using climbing skills or using people who are better with ropes or better with ladders and all of that kind of stuff. But in terms of when they're going higher on a more technical mountain, that's really where the Sherpas use that. So they recognise that this group of people are going to be the people who are going to stay at Camp 1, and these people are going to go up and prepare the ladders. These people are going to be, putting the ropes up, and these people are actually going to be trekking with the individuals to actually get them to the top. So that aspect from the Sherpa team is probably more so than necessarily the people who they're getting to the top in the commercial enterprise. It's more the actual Sherpa team as such, because the people who they're getting to the top once they get there are generally just getting themselves up there, as opposed to supporting the other ones to get up.
That's right. It's like, I just got to manage my own blisters and knees. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Is that a glass of wine you're having there?
No, it's actually water with lemon. It looks more like a G&T, doesn't it?
Oh, I'm just going to channel that. It's Friday afternoon, like G&T time. Absolutely. Really curious about Everest Base Camp itself. So, seen movies, heard lots about it. What is the experience like of actually rocking up and seeing the other tents there and the other expeditioners there?
Okay, I've got to tell you, I was mega disappointed with Everest Base Camp. So there's only a certain time of year where everyone, so it's only April, May, when it's actually summit season and there's other tents there and it's all actually a town and people are all excited. So I, like I said, wasn't really prepared, hadn't done a lot of research. So I was expecting, oh my God, there's going to be this amazing place, Everest Base Camp. There's going to be a big sign and there's going to be people there waiting for us. Yeah, no, there wasn't even a sign. There was just a really rocky area. And where they actually have the camp, it actually moves every year because it's actually on a glacier. So every year they decide where they're actually going to put the camp. So there's no sign, there's no nothing. At one point there was a sign saying Everest Base Camp with a big arrow that way. but there's no sign. So it's actually quite disappointing. But I'm sure that would be a different experience, and I think I'm going to have to get Gabinda to take me back there, actually in summit season, so you get a bit more of a vibe.
No vibe. Was there a view?
Well, there was a view of Everest, yeah, but like it's basically just a big expanse of rock and then mountains all around you. So you're kind of somewhat in a bit of a valley at that point.
Oh, that sounds beautiful.
It was lovely. It was lovely. And trekking up there was amazing, like days upon days of just having Himalayan mountains just coming up all around you, and you're just on this trekking trail, just experiencing how lovely life is. Like it was just such a change from my crazy hustle bustle day that I, had back in Brisbane at work, and was probably really exactly what I needed, somebody who would become quite disengaged with what I was up to. It was like, oh, yeah, this is what life's all about. Okay, let's see if I can take a bit of this back with me.
Well, you did. His name's Gabinda.
Yeah, exactly. I'm taking this literally back with me.
And did he return with you at that time?
No. So I didn't realise how difficult it was to get people into Australia. I just thought, as an Australian, you just decide where you want to go and you pay the visa fee and you can go wherever you like. But that's apparently not the case in Australia. So it actually took us 12 months to get him on a visitor visa out to Australia.
On a visitor visa?
It was a visitor visa, and then he had 5 months here all up, and then we had to decide pretty quickly, or within that 5 months, whether we were going to get married or not. And the idea of going back to Nepal and having to go through all of that hoo-ha again, I thought, let's just do it. Let's just do it. And a friend of mine actually, I said, I'm not sure whether I should get married to him. I don't know if it's the right thing to do. And this friend of mine said, what's the issue? Like, why wouldn't you get married to him? I said, because sometimes he annoys me. And she said, that's it? I said, yeah. And she said, marry him.
Oh, God. So how long have you been married now?
5.5 years.
Okay. Yeah. Does he still annoy you?
Yeah. He still annoys me sometimes. But I think over time you kind of get to know the annoyances. And I'm sure I annoy him too. And it's interesting because we all know that, marriage is all about compromise. And one of the things that we learned to compromise on is being really busy. Like I was always really busy, and Gabinda doesn't really like that. So the weekends were always jam-packed full of things to do. And he's like, why are you always rushing? And I'm like, well, because I have to do this, this and this. Anyway, over the last 6 years, I've definitely slowed down. And now part of our compromise is, he says, is it essential? Is it necessary? He says, is it necessary that I go to this? And we have a rule that if someone's cooked dinner for us or someone's cooked for us, it's necessary. But if we're going out to a meal, it's not necessary.
Okay. He's a little bit more introverted than you, perhaps?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, a little bit. I think it's probably also, like, he becomes a lot more tired listening in English all the time. I think that's probably got a bit to do with it. In Nepal, he's actually extremely extroverted, and he runs everything because he's speaking in his own language, and he is so used to working as a guide, making sure everyone's happy and all of that. But in Australia, I think he finds it a lot more difficult to converse and to be thinking in English all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you came back to Australia, you sorted out your love life, and then you decided work. So reinvention of work for you, what did that look like?
So it was probably a 6-year thing, but so when I came back, I needed money. So I just got a job, and then I got another job where I was actually in a leadership role there, and I had quite a bad experience with some bullying. So I was actually the victim of some bullying. And as part of that, I ended up being out of work or stopping work and dealing with my mental health for 7 months. So then at that point, I recognised, everything I'd learned, how the universe works, Zoe, that keeps knocking at your door until you listen and starts screaming. And it's like, you really need to change something here, Jade. So and that was when I recognised that I really wanted to step out of the corporate world as such, or step out of working for somebody else, and doing something different. And at that time, I wasn't really sure what that was, but I took the next 2.5 or 3 years to establish that it was advising organisations on how to build better teams, how to have greater connection, and how to have happier people at work. And I guess my real mission is that employees feel engaged and feel happy to go to work every day. Like, obviously it's a very lofty goal, but I just saw too many people who were being dragged down, I guess, and didn't really know where they were heading with their life, or didn't really know why they were going to work, and really trying to change that was my plan. And, making sure, helping organisations to create really psychologically safe places that people wanted to come to work.
That is a beautiful mission, and something that we should all be doing every day, getting up and being happy to go to work. Can I ask you, what did you learn through that bullying experience? Apart from like, this is what I want to do, is not do that, but do something more inspiring.
I learned a lot. So I learned about my own resilience. I also learned that in that instance, I stood up to the bully and I continued to fight for the whole process. I probably would do the same thing again, but I recognised what a massive toll that had on me, and it also made me more empathetic to other people's situations. So I recognised why people would just let it go and leave an organisation because they didn't want to, go down that track. It gave me a really good appreciation for how hard it is to stand up, and how hard it is to continue to go into a workplace when you feel like that. And I guess probably it's not that difficult to support the value of supporting your colleagues can never be underestimated. Like that, recognizing and appreciating them and supporting them to get their work done, or to get through whatever they're going through, is just an amazing thing that you can do to someone on every day.
What a beautiful message, and a great message to leave the listeners with. Jade, that was a wonderful story. I loved every aspect of it.
Sorry if I revealed a bit too much.
Perfect. Where can people find out more about you and your book and your work?
So my website is jadelee.com.au. You can also catch up with me on LinkedIn. Again, Jade Lee. I'm based in Brisbane, and there is a picture of a mountain, of course, in the background of my LinkedIn profile. And my book is available on Amazon and Booktopia and everything like that. But there's also a link on my website under the books section. And I will actually put it, I think you'll like this one, Zoe. I'm not the only Jade Lee author out there. I only have one book, What My Sherpa Taught Me About Teams. All the other books, which are kind of a Mills and Boon variety, they're not me. You may think it's me after this conversation, but they're actually not me.
There you go. 2 for 1 when you Google Jade Lee. I love it. Jade, thank you so much for an entertaining, raucous, and insightful afternoon. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Zoe.
Well, that was a really fun interview. A great conversation to have, like we did on a Friday afternoon, about going on grand adventures, the experiences you have along the way, and the lessons you can take with you. So what am I taking away from our conversation with Jade about engaged teams? I think for me, it's about that appreciation of everyone's contributions. It was probably a critical piece there. And I think when we're talking about autonomous teams that operate under holacracy, I think that's got to be a really important aspect of people working effectively together, is knowing who you're working with and being able to appreciate, acknowledge, and celebrate and encourage the contributions of each and every individual. So no one gets left behind, no one gets left out, and no one can hide either. And that's a big topic, I know, for a lot of leaders, is when they're trying to set up autonomous teams, so encourage the teams to be more independent. A lot of people can, hide in the team environment and not pull their weight. And certainly team members often complain about that. So when we step up, when we ask people to contribute to their best and we hold each other in that light, I think we have the best chance of encouraging people to live up to expectations instead of live down to them. All right. Well, that's my observations for today. The show is brought to you, as always, by Amplifiers, which is our experienced leaders leadership development program. So CEOs, managing directors, and senior executives gather to really push the envelope and discover what's next for them. How can they think, be, and do better as leaders? And if that sounds like, you'd be up for that, we have a community that's growing. We have a local chapter here in Canberra, and we have a group that's also meets virtually from all around Australia. If you're interested, check us out, zoerouth.com. Click on programs, click on amplifiers. Would love to meet you and find out what's next on your leadership adventure. In the meantime, live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast with leadership expert Zoe Routh. For more about people stuff and to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.